Okay, let's talk about a number you've probably seen a million times, your body mass index, or BMI. It's that number that pops up at the doctor's office, on health apps, even with insurance companies. They all seem obsessed with it. But here's the real question, right? Should you be?
That is the million-dollar question we're going to tackle today. Because, honestly, the story behind BMI is way more complicated and, frankly, a lot more interesting than you'd think. So, let's get right into it. All right, first things first. What even is this number? Let's break it down. It's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. So, at its most basic level, BMI is really just a screening tool. Think of it as a quick first look, a way to get a general idea of whether your weight is in a healthy range for your height. And the math behind it is pretty straightforward. It's just your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. And once you have that number, it slots you into one of these categories from the World Health Organization. You can see here the normal range, which is considered the lowest risk, is anywhere from 18.5 to 24.9. Once you hit 25, that's where the overweight category starts. And a BMI of 30 or more, that's the threshold for obesity. Okay, so why all the focus on this one simple number? I mean, it seems a little basic, right? Well, because despite all its flaws, and trust me, we're going to get to those, the sheer volume of data connecting BMI to our health is just, well, it's overwhelming.
And here's the key phrase you need to remember. At a population level. This is so important. When scientists look at massive groups of people, we're talking millions of people over decades, a really clear pattern just jumps out. BMI becomes this incredibly powerful tool for predicting long-term health risks across a huge population.
And this right here, this shows you what I mean. This chart is based on a huge study, more than 10 million people, and it shows the risk crystal clear. If you look at the normal BMI, that's our baseline. Move over to overweight, and the risk of mortality goes up. But look what happens when you get into the obese category. The risk almost doubles. You just can't argue with that trend. But when we look at specific diseases, the connection gets even more dramatic. Take type 2 diabetes. The link here is practically exponential. Get this. Someone with a BMI over 35 has a 20-fold increase in risk compared to someone with a BMI in the normal range. 20 times. That's just staggering. And yeah, this has a real direct impact on how long people live. For individuals with a BMI over 40, the estimated loss in life expectancy is around 10 years. Let that sink in for a second. 10 years. To put that into perspective for you, that's about the same impact as being a lifelong heavy smoker. So yeah, this isn't just some abstract number, it has very, very real consequences. But, and this is a huge but, for you, as one single person, BMI is absolutely not the whole story. Not even close. Let's talk about why. This right here, this is the single biggest, most famous flaw of BMI. It has no idea. Zero. Whether it's looking at a pound of muscle or a pound of fat. They both just count as weight. So you can have a super fit athlete packed with dense muscle who gets flagged with a high BMI. And they could have the exact same number as a sedentary person with a lot of body fat. Same BMI, but their actual health risks are worlds apart. And it goes way beyond just the muscle versus fat thing. BMI misses a ton of other critical details. For instance, it doesn't tell us where that fat is on your body, and as we'll see, that's a huge deal. It also doesn't really adjust for how our bodies change as we get older, or for some really important differences between various ethnic groups. Yeah, here's a perfect example of that. We know from research that for many people of Asian descent, their risk for metabolic problems like diabetes starts to climb at a much lower BMI. So for these populations, the overweight risk category really begins at a BMI of 23, not the standard 25. The one-size-fits-all chart just doesn't work for everyone. So what's the solution then? Do we just junk the whole idea of BMI? Well, not exactly. The smarter approach is to not throw it out completely, but to use it for what it is, a starting point. And from there, we pair it with other, much more detailed measures to get the real story. So a good doctor isn't just going to look at your BMI. They're going to combine it with a whole toolkit to get a true picture of your health. We're talking about things like waist circumference. Super simple, but incredibly powerful. Waist-to-hip ratio. And of course, the really important stuff. Blood tests that look at your actual metabolic markers, like your glucose levels and your cholesterol. And there's a reason measuring your waist is so important. It's because it gives us a good clue about this stuff, visceral fat. Now, this is not the fat you can pinch on your belly. No, this is the dangerous stuff, the fat that's stored deep inside, wrapped around your organs, like your liver and intestines. You can think of it as a metabolically active, like a little factory, that's constantly pumping out inflammatory molecules that can cause disease.
Okay, so let's see how this all comes together to paint a much clearer picture. This chart basically shows how doctors combine those two measures, BMI and waist circumference. So look, if you have a high BMI but your waist measurement is normal, your risk is actually considered lower. But if you have a high BMI and a high waist circumference, that's the combo right there. That's what signals the highest risk for things like heart disease and diabetes.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how to assess the situation. Now let's switch gears and talk about action. What can you actually do? What does a toolkit for keeping a healthy balance even look like?
It really boils down to these 4 pillars. And look, none of this is going to be some crazy new secret. It's the foundational stuff: a balanced diet, regular physical activity, getting enough sleep, and managing your stress. Each one of these plays a huge role, and they all work together to keep you healthy in the long run.
When it comes to diet, the focus really shouldn't be on just obsessively counting every single calorie. It's much more about balance. So, making sure you're getting complex carbs from things like whole grains, enough protein to keep your muscles strong, and of course, those healthy fats you find in stuff like avocados, nuts, and fish. That's the real key.
And what about exercise? Well, the goal is actually super simple and totally achievable. The recommendation is for about 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. That's just 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And doing just that, something as simple as a brisk walk, can have a massive impact on improving how your body uses insulin and helping to reduce that dangerous visceral fat we talked about.
And please do not underestimate the power of sleep. It's so important. When you don't get enough sleep, your body's hormones get all out of whack. It starts pumping out more ghrelin, that's the I'm hungry hormone, and at the same time it produces less leptin, which is the hormone that tells you you're full. It's like this hormonal double whammy that is literally biologically pushing you to eat more and store more fat. At the end of the day, it really all comes back to this basic idea of energy balance, right? Calories in versus calories out. But the key to long-term success has nothing to do with those crazy short-term crash diets. It's all about building consistent, sustainable, healthy habits across all 4 of those pillars we just talked about.
So let's wrap this all up with a final thought. The next time you see your BMI number, try not to get fixated on just the number itself. Instead, think of it as a little nudge, a prompt, to ask a much deeper and more important question. And that question is my overall body composition, my mix of muscle and fat, my lifestyle, my daily habits, is that combination putting my health at risk? Because that is the question that really truly matters.